Did you know that Uncluttered and Unfiltered is a passion project created to reach and connect a community of women over 50? Growing production and promotion costs can be a challenge, and your support means the world. When you join our Patreon bonus club, you'll have access to a ton of otherwise unavailable video content, plus commercial-free episodes and a private chat community where Christine and I will answer any questions about the upcoming series, Organizing Eden, which is really for all of us. Plus, we have a few surprises as well coming your way. For just $5 a month, you'll be helping us grow this incredible sisterhood. And if that's not possible, hey, we get it. Truly, the most incredible way you can support us is just by telling one friend about Uncluttered and Unfiltered. And thank you. We love that you're here.
Welcome to Uncluttered and Unfiltered, the podcast urging you to let it go and don't look back, with nationally acclaimed professional organizer Christine Stone and self-proclaimed hot damn mess radio and TV personality Eden Kendall.
Welcome everybody to Uncluttered and Unfiltered podcast for women over 50 with Christine and me, Eden. And this is a subject that we stumbled across, pelvic health and the strength of your pelvic muscles and your pelvic floor. And we're going to talk at length about that with our special guest. But before we do that, should we get into a little bit about our weekend?
Yes, we definitely need to get into our weekend because it relates to it.
And 100% does, but so that we don't leave her stranded in the middle here, because some of you guys are watching this on Patreon, on the bonus member club. We're going to make sure everybody can fully get everything we need from this episode regardless, but you'll see a lovely lady sitting in the middle of us, and that is Laura Bunso. Laura, can you tell everybody what you do for a living, because it's fascinating?
I am a pelvic floor therapist specializing in everything between here and here.
Here being what? The
belly button to mid-thigh. All the things that no one wants to talk about at dinner, but everyone struggles with.
Okay. And we actually got on this subject a few episodes back when I was on Instagram, and for some reason Instagram thought I really needed to see this ad over and over again. And it's a video game that you play with your hoo-ha. And you're familiar with that?
Yes, I am. That's actually a product called the PeriFit. And it's basically, it's a cool little device which will have a little sensor that inserts into the vagina. And whenever you squeeze, the little bird flies or whatever program you have on it.
And I said we should do a big tournament of unlovable ladies. And we were kidding at the time. And then Christine said, you know what? This is a serious subject. Your pelvic floor has to do with so many other things that your body functions, needs. So we're gonna discuss that. But before we do that, she and I attended a concert on Saturday night. It was the Donny Osmond concert.
Yes, it was, and it was fabulous.
It was so much fun. We were surrounded by women who should be listening to our podcast.
Yes.
I wish I brought some kind of flyer.
Yes.
It was a lot of fun. There's so much to say about that, but I feel like we may have already covered so much of Donny Osmond. But one thing that you noticed about me was
she had to pee every 20 minutes. And
until the show started. But then even afterwards, she immediately had to pee. And the line, of course, at the theater was long. Because a lot of 50-plus-year-old women were holding their pee.
Exactly. So I said, coincidentally, oh, look what we're talking about on Monday. Maybe we should mention it. And you said, yeah, that's a great idea. Happy to be a guinea pig.
So that is one of many issues that women of a certain age face. So Laura, why don't we go ahead and start with, when we talk about the pelvic floor, what does a pelvic floor specialist do?
So that's a really good question. I'm going to start with what the pelvic floor is, if that's okay. Because I have 3 children, and one of them is still in high school, about to be a senior, and I had one of them ask me just this past week, and had no idea what the pelvic floor was, and it's something sometimes I take for granted because I've been doing it for 25 years. I'm also going to show the model just for the listeners who are looking at it, but I'll talk through it if that's okay.
Perfect. Okay. So she will hold up a model. We'll do our best to make sure that even if you're not on our video feed, you can understand what she's saying.
I'll talk through it. If you touch right at the front of your pelvis, where the 2 sides of your pelvis come together and just above your vagina, the padded area there called the mons pubis. It's where pubic hair grows, basically. That area underneath it, if we peel back the skin and the tissue, is called the pubic symphysis. There's a joint right there. It's where the two sides of the pelvis come together. Sometimes people get a little discomfort there or pain there too. That's something that we might treat. And then if you put your hand on your hip, where you might hold your baby, that's called your iliac crest. That's the bony rim or edge of the top of the pelvis. And then if I laid you down on your back, you lie on your back and we peeled back the labia. So if you're lying in what we call a hook line position, like you're about to have a gynecological exam, and you peel back the labia and the skin and the fat tissue, you would uncover pretty superficially, so just under the skin, you would uncover what are the pelvic floor muscles. And these go clear from the front, where that pubic symphysis is, all the way to the back and attached to your tailbone, which is actually the bottom of your spine. So they go clear from front to back, and then they go from one hip, so you've got your hip socket here on either side, and then you've got a muscle of the pelvic floor that actually attaches to your femur, to your hip bone, and helps with the rotation and stabilization of the hip. So it's important for someone who's running or walking. We're all walking around. So these muscles are striated muscles, which means they're just like your bicep. It can get weak. It can be strained, like your back muscle, your hamstring muscle. It can be in spasm. It can get stronger if you work it out. Just if I go to the gym and lift weights with my bicep and do curls, I can bulk up the muscle. The pelvic floor muscles, which are essentially the floor of your pelvis, function the same way as any of your other muscles that you might work out at the gym. And if we look down into the pelvis, you can see here, and I'll just describe it. You have the bladder, and just behind the bladder's right in front, just behind the pubic symphysis that we talked about.
Do you need me to hold anything?
I got
She's got a lot of organs and bones and things in her hands.
I'm a pro. I do this for all of our patients that come in. We describe this to them before we do any kind of examination. So bladder, just behind that, if you still have your uterus, is there. Then the two little alien-looking parts are ovaries that stick out on the two sides. And then just behind that is the rectum. Now, if you go to a hospital campus, these are very different buildings you might go and have treatment for. But as far as pelvic floor therapy goes, they're all right next to each other, and they're all controlled by the same group of muscles, which are your pelvic floor muscles.
Which is what you described earlier, that goes hip to hip,
front to back.
tailbone to...
Yes, and if you look down into the pelvis, which just looks like a bowl, if you look down into the pelvis, you can see there's nothing there holding your guts in except your pelvic floor. So I think of it almost like a trampoline, where you've got the bony rim, meaning the metal on the outside, and then the mesh on the inside, being the pelvic floor muscles. They don't function quite like the trampoline would, but so your organs sitting on top, right? The organs sitting on top would basically be like people on the trampoline. So if your pelvic floor is nice and supported and strong, things are held up and supported really well. If it's not, there's a whole list, and we'll get into it later, of dysfunctions and problems that you can develop.
Okay, can I hold the ovaries and the
uterus?
the uterus.
Here you go.
So, like you were saying, so if you've had a full hysterectomy,
Which
you don't
both of
have,
us have
which
had.
both of us have
Okay,
had.
so you have if you had a total hysterectomy.
Uh-oh, she's pulling it apart.
Okay, you've had total hysterectomy.
Yes.
You had the uterus removed.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
ovaries removed.
Yes.
That's a complete hysterectomy.
Yes.
Yep.
So what holds everything together then, if this is near the bladder, does everything fall out?
Uncluttered and Unfiltered is supported by Hearts for Minds. Looking to cut back on alcohol? Dry July is the perfect opportunity to reduce or entirely remove alcohol and experience improved sleep, lower stress, and a mental health boost. This Dry July, prioritize your well-being with Hearts for Minds Mocktails with Meaning free ebook, featuring delicious mocktails from top restaurant mixologists. Discover a world of non-alcoholic options for home, poolside, or dining out. Join the movement. Raise a glass to mental wellness and support Hearts for Minds. Find the Mocktails with Meaning ebook at heartsforminds.org.
So things can fall out and have nothing to do with your hysterectomy.
Okay.
So I joke all the time. I'm like, those babies come out, they grab hold of things on their way out. You can have an organ prolapse at 25 years old after having a couple of babies. You can have an organ prolapse, just means that your organ prolapse means something's falling.
Right.
You can have a prolapse of your eyelid. You can have a prolapse of your bladder or your uterus. Anything can basically, if your pelvic floor is not strong and supportive, you can actually have such a bad prolapse that your guts literally fall out. A grade 4 prolapse.
Oh my God, thank you, gravity.
Yes.
What? That's so scary.
So it is scary sounding, but it's not, it's pretty benign as far as things that can be wrong with you. It's just really unsettling to have to push your bladder or your uterus back into your vagina to sit down. And I'm grabbing myself and showing someone how a patient might do it to be able to sit down.
Okay, unsettling is such an understatement.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
It's definitely
It freaks people out.
interesting.
It freaks people out.
Yeah.
So
It's fascinating. So that's a lot to take in. Thankfully, there are people in your role.
yes.
What is it that somebody would come to see you for? And would it be after something like this happens, or how would they know they should see you?
Or can it be preventative? Like, I just want to learn
Yes.
how to do this so I'm preventing leakage, or I'm preventing.
Yes. So all of the above. Honestly, thankfully for social media, we do have people come to us prior to things being so severe. When I first started treating this 25 years ago at Mayo Clinic, before I started this practice, I might have a woman come in who's been suffering with whatever. There's so many things that fit into this category of pelvic floor therapy. But she might have been suffering, let's say, pain with intercourse for 20 years before she got to me. Now people come in, maybe it's been 5 years, which is still just far too long if you think about it. But it's been really just wonderful to see that time frame start to shorten, and hopefully it continues to tighten up. But some people come in before they have a baby, and they want to, we might have a doula refer a patient that they want to have therapy to get prepared for birth so they can be as strong as possible and start some manual stretching vaginally to get prepared and be able to give birth. Some people might come after they've given birth to address a number of things that can go wrong with having a baby. We were designed to have them, but sometimes things happen. Or we might even have someone who's never even had intercourse. I've had a nunness patient before. I've had the whole spectrum, from nuns literally to porn stars and everything in between.
Wow, that's
Yes.
an interesting job.
Yes.
Nuns to porn stars and everything in between.
Yes.
That is definitely a way to tell us that you've seen it all.
So since we are a podcast for women over 50, we both hear this all the time.
Yeah.
Laughing and
is makes you
peeing,
pee.
coughing and peeing.
Frequency.
Frequency,
Pain in intercourse,
urgency,
for sure.
pain with intercourse, you name it, we hear it all the time. So that's where I think both of us, like her peeing,
Yes.
you know,
Going to
all
yeah.
night long.
Yeah.
What different kinds of urinary problems are there that you help with?
Okay, first of all, one of the reasons why this is all so challenging and seems so mystifying is this is the only group of muscles that's tucked up inside, so you can't see them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that presents. Sometimes you have a problem, your tight muscles in your neck. You can even see it. Someone can touch it and work on it for you. The pelvic floor is a little more intimate than that, a little more sensitive. So there is a long list of things that can happen with all of this. For the bladder, for example, bladder control, because these pelvic floor muscles control everything that goes in and out, basically. So bladder, you could have leakage. Basically, any unintentional loss of urine, we call urinary incontinence. Some women will say, oh, I just dribble a little bit whenever I giggle. That's incontinence.
Mm-hmm.
No one wants to say that word, but that's what it is. You can also have difficulty voiding. In other words, you sit down to urinate and it takes you a minute to get the stream started. You can't quite get out, or you start pushing.
I'm guilty. Kind of funny that I say guilty, feeling like I've done something so wrong, but it's this urge I have where I'll sit down and I don't really have to go, but I'll sit there until I go a little bit just to get it out of the way so I know I've gone.
Well, and sometimes we feel like we've got to get every last drop out.
That's me.
Yeah. So we call that just in case voiding. We actually have an acronym for it. We call them JICs, JICs, because you're going just in case to try to prevent from needing to go again in an hour or two because you have urinary
We were
frequency.
trained that way. We
Absolutely.
grew up being told, let's go before we get in a car. Let's go before we...
Or if you're at a
Absolutely.
concert, you don't want to go in a porta potty.
Absolutely.
You know
Agreed.
So you're like, I have to go
Agreed.
a bunch of times before I get there.
The difficulty with going just in case, first of all, it takes 2 to 4 hours for your bladder to fill if you're drinking normal volumes of water. So you should be able, at a minimum, to hold your urine for about an hour and a half before it's full. A full bladder is 450 cc's of urine for an average sized person. You guys are pretty petite. Maybe yours is 400 or 350. So 30 cc's is 1 ounce. So that's about 15 ounces. So think about a can of Coke. Like it's larger than, so that's the volume. That's normal output for one void
For
if your
one?
bladder is full.
A can of Coke?
Yes, a can of Coke.
Now
So-
they have a tablespoon a trip.
Yes. I tell people if your volume did not match your urge, then you have urinary frequency.
Okay.
Ooh.
Okay. So if I feel like...
If you're like, oh, I gotta go, I'm gonna pee my
If
pants,
you
fine,
use the
go.
word racehorse on
Yes.
your way to the bathroom and nothing hardly comes out,
You
that's...
need pelvic floor therapy.
I see.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, this is very
Yes,
interesting.
yes.
Fascinating.
So the other things that comes out of you emptying your bladder just in case, your bladder is a vessel. It's designed to fill, store, and then empty. Same thing with your bowels. They're designed to fill, store, and empty. People who are stuck on laxatives, we have some women that come in here that are taking 15 laxatives a day to go to the bathroom. Your bowels were designed to hold it for at least a day, maybe 2. There's nothing wrong with that, but we forget that things are supposed to be stored. So urine, for example, is your bladder should fill, store, and then fully empty.
It's almost like carrying a water bottle around and never wanting to have anything in it. It's like
That's
it's
right.
there for you to be able to carry it with you to keep it. But you're like, oh, I gotta make sure it's empty at every moment.
That's right. But once your bladder's irritated like that and you've gotten into this cycle and it makes you feel like a crazy person sometimes.
Yes.
Because you're like, I had to pee so
Embarrassing.
bad. It is, but you're like, I had to pee so bad. And I sit down and I'm like, there's nothing there. You're like, do I have a UTI? What's wrong with me? Why am I feeling this?
Christine asked me that. She said, I think you have a UTI.
No, I did. I said, do you have a
Yeah.
UTI? So what about the middle of the night peeing? Like having to get up in the middle of the night? Is that fall
So-
into some category?
That's called nocturia. There's a name for that, and there's treatment for that too. It's all part of this bladder dysfunction, or this whole dysfunctional voiding, we might call it. Like you have dysfunctional voiding if you're
Clearly, yes.
going to the bathroom like that. A couple of things that can be helpful for nocturia or urinary frequency or even urinary leakage. A lot of people, their first thing if they're leaking is they cut back on their fluids. But to help all of those things and keep our bladder healthier, we can dial back on bladder irritants, which you're not going to like my list of bladder irritants.
No, I know
Oh,
it's coffee and wine.
Coffee and wine.
Oh,
So
really?
it's caffeine and alcohol. It doesn't mean you
We
can't
might have to
those
suffer.
things. Yeah, you may like I'm just going to carry a little urinal around with me. So,
Gotta go. We're gonna pack it in.
Yes, that's the thing.
In serious.
One
Just
thing-
in moderation.
yes, or make sure you're well hydrated in the morning before you. I love caffeine. If I could have an IV infusion of it, I would do it. And everyone's a little. Some cultures. My daughter just got back from Brazil a couple weeks ago. Their pregnant women drink thermoses of coffee, and their babies don't come out with 3 heads. So
Right.
there are different cultures and different viewpoints on all those sorts of things. And I'm not condoning that whenever you're pregnant, but your bladder does get irritated with caffeine, and it doesn't mean you can't have it. Just understand that if you're going somewhere after your cup of coffee and you don't want to be in the bathroom 15 times, maybe you don't have 3 cups, you have 1, or you have a glass of water before you have that caffeine
Yeah, that's
hit your
what I do.
bladder. Or, and a lot of people, when they're drinking their wine in the evening, they maybe don't want a glass of water because they want to feel the wine a little quicker, but it is something that would keep your bladder a little calmer.
And regardless of if you're consuming caffeine and alcohol, these deal is the more you're hydrating.
Yes,
Getting
the
your
bladder
bladder-
lining. We tend to dial back on fluids in general as we age and as we start to get these bladder and voiding dysfunctions. And it's counterintuitive, but you need more water.
Okay. I know it does seem counterintuitive, but I fully understand that. analogy
Carbonated
as well.
drinks, I feel, do that also.
For some people, carbonate. Some people have a very sensitive bladder, and there's actually a longer list of things that could be irritating. The most common things are going to be caffeine and alcohol, but artificial sweeteners can be very irritating to the lining of the bladder. Carbonated drinks, sometimes citrus, sometimes tomato product. Some people have higher sensitivities to certain things than other people.
This is fascinating to me.
Now, Christine made a beautiful list of some things she wanted to make sure we covered, so I don't want to skip over things because I feel like every time you bring one thing up, we're hammering it because it hits so incredibly close to home.
Yeah.
But the treatment options I know are something.
Yeah, what are some of the treatment options?
And what do you do here? Because it's set up, some of the rooms are very much like a gynecological
Office.
Yes. So first of all, men and women have issues with this. So we treat males and females, although women have a lot more issues with that. And part of that has to do with our urethra is a little shorter. So it's easier for us to get UTIs. It's easier for us to have leakage and things like that. But treatments, as far as pelvic floor therapy, because this is one route to take to address these sorts of things, pelvic floor therapy involves an evaluation with a specialized therapist. And here we have 8 therapists that are all specialists in pelvic
We
floor.
have done you a disservice because for those in North Florida, now we are a global podcast, but for those in North Florida, we haven't even asked you to share the name of your practice.
So it's called SMARTBODY Physical Therapy. And we do have patients who come from near and far. We've had them as far away as Saudi Arabia,
Wow.
India, that will come and stay in a hotel for a couple weeks and have therapy each day. But we are the Mecca in Northeast Florida or Southeast, because it's pretty unusual to even have one pelvic floor expert.
Right.
And to have several, it's pretty unusual.
So I did interrupt you. So you were
That's
saying that
okay.
here in this practice.
So in this practice, the majority of the patients coming here are for pelvic floor therapy. We do have a few other things, so don't make the assumption if you see someone in the waiting room. They could be coming for something else, but most of them are coming for this. And it involves an evaluation. So you will undress, but there's no cold metal objects, no speculum, no stirrups or anything like that. For the women, we'll check sensation and be sure the nerves are intact and insert a gloved finger to check the contraction and the relaxation of the muscles. We're looking at the integrity of the muscle. So we're looking at the ability to control, to relax, to contract, how strong. So 5 out of 5 pelvic floor contraction is like a baby sucking on a bottle. You should be able to clamp down. So if you're having intercourse and your partner's a male and you clamp down and he can feel you squeeze really strongly, you probably have a really strong pelvic floor. If he can't feel you at all, or you can even use your own finger to check and see, do I feel when you're in the shower? Put your finger there, see if you see anything move. If your finger doesn't feel any movement at all, you might be like a 0 or a 1 out of 5. And then we check the endurance of the muscle. So not just can you squeeze it, but can you contract it? Normal endurance for your pelvic floor is 10 repetitions for a 10-second hold.
Is that a Kegel?
Yeah, I was going to say.
it. So that's a
Kegel.
Kegel. It's an older term. We don't really use that
Right.
term so much
Oh,
anymore.
okay.
But pelvic floor contraction is what
Okay.
that is. And what's really important, and one of the reasons we try to get away from using that term is because a lot of women misunderstand squeezing or doing a Kegel, because I'll have people that come in and they're like, I don't know why my doctor sent me here. I've been doing Kegels for 20 years and it hasn't helped me at all. And then I'll do the examination and I'll have them try to close the muscles around my finger and their whole pelvis will lift up off of the table. But
They're squeezing their butt
They're
cheeks.
lifting, they're squeezing their inner thighs, they're squeezing everything. And I'll say, I don't know what you've been doing for 20 years, but it hasn't been a Kegel.
But
Hasn't
they
been
might have a
pelvic floor
nice little
contraction.
caboose.
Yes,
on that,
I do.
right?
I got a nice little rump back there, but they don't have strong pelvic floor, where it's just not coordinated and you can't see it. So it's hard to connect with this. Sometimes people end up having a fairly quick rise in strength, like they might be a 1 out of 5 the first day. And I from working out in the gym, you both look like you work out, to build strength. If I'm going to
I love her.
Yeah. If I'm going to do a bicep curl and I'm starting with 10-pound weight, I think we can all agree and understand it's going to take me some time to get to 20 pounds, right?
Sure.
Maybe at least 2
Right.
months. For the pelvic floor, it's striated muscle. It's the same thing. It takes time to build that strength. However, because oftentimes the weakness isn't true muscle weakness, it's more about connection and coordination. You might go from a 1 out of 5 to a 3 out of 5 strength inside of 2 or 3 weeks, because now you understand
that's
what you're
hopeful.
trying to do. Yes.
That's very hopeful.
What would you say, Laura, to somebody listening right now who, first of all, we hope that if you are suffering from any of these things to a point where it is making your life less than what it could be, that you'll find somewhere in your area, or you'll travel here and you'll take care of it with a professional. But what would you say to somebody who says that just is not going to happen, but I would like to start doing some things to either prevent the weakening or strengthen my pelvic floor? What are some things maybe
that they could do at home?
And which of these products that the internet is sending to my feed are real, which are just cute but not what would be the best thing for me?
There are a lot of options for things. If you just want to be at home and you don't want any of this stuff on your Amazon history whenever you make order, you can do what I described earlier, which is you can use your finger and see. So if you're having pain with intercourse, for example, oftentimes when we're over 50, everyone thinks it's hormone, it's vaginal dryness. They want estrays and other things, which some of those things might be necessary, but sometimes it's just because we've lost control of these muscles and we're tensing them all the time, often in the reaction of being afraid of our guts falling out, the organ prolapse, or urine, or even worse, stool, having leakage. So we walk around this sort of low-grade clench of our muscles, and we're not fully relaxed. So we're doing ourselves a disservice. We're not actually getting stronger. We're just straining our muscles. So I think about it like it's like trying to get stronger by just holding my arm up in the air all day long. It doesn't make me stronger. It just makes my neck sore. So you can use your finger, stand in the shower, see what you feel. Insert your finger vaginally. Try to do a little closing. Think about closing around the finger. I think about it like the stuffed animal game where you put the quarter in and the claw drops down.
Yeah, the claw game, sure.
Yeah. So that's how I describe the pelvic floor, and that's how I think about the full range of motion of the pelvic floor. So you want to lower and open, which is what you need to do to sit down and urinate, not hover. You sit down on the commode and actually relax the muscles.
I'm thinking about
Yes, and you can practice it, visualize it. So lower and open. So that claw thing, it doesn't open forcefully. It's not a push, it's not a strain. So you lower and open, and then you close and lift. So use your finger, see if you feel it. Once you get connected, and I have patients do that even whenever they come in here, even when I manually show them and teach them. And then we also use surface EMG or biofeedback to help retrain them. They can see a lot like an EKG.
Sure, it's like a heart monitor.
Yeah, they could, but it's for the vaginal muscles. It doesn't hurt or anything. It just shows you a line. It's not a photo, just like the heart monitor. You can see how well you're contracting or relaxing. But you can get that feedback from your finger to an extent and see what you're doing with that. The other thing you can do is take really good care of yourself. Being generally fit and conditioned is helpful with all of this. Every pound of weight you have on your abdomen exponentially increases the weight on your bladder. So it increases your likelihood of having leakage. And being able to be hydrated, and a large percentage of this, almost more than half of all of this, is got to do with lifestyle and voiding habits. Because we've gotten into these patterns of going every 20 minutes. So in the absence of a UTI or some other interstitial cystitis or some other really more severe bladder dysfunctions, which most people don't have, with what you are describing, urinary frequency, make yourself wait 5 minutes. Do a little contraction. A contraction of the pelvic floor we call it urge inhibition. It'll inhibit the urge of the bladder. And another way to do it, sit forward, is to get on your perineum. So if you lean forward, if you're in a firm chair, and you set that little space between the vagina and the anus, the perineal body, there's other terms for it too.
Yes.
So,
in line with faint.
Exactly. It's also the place where if you had an episiotomy, it's where they would cut. Or if you had a tear, unfortunately, some people get a grade 4 tear and they tear completely from the vagina to the anus. So if you can sit forward, and that's one way that you can practice this exercise. If you don't want to touch yourself, some women aren't comfortable with that, and that's okay. If you're in a firm chair, and this chair is perfect, I can lean your pelvis, tilt your pelvis forward, and then just try to lift it away. Now your whole body shouldn't move. Christine's whole body just lifted up whenever she tried it. So if you're doing it right, the only thing moving is your pelvic floor. So it's a gentle contraction, So it's like closing your hand, not like making a tight fist. It's like closing your hand. So you close and lift, and then you lower and open, and you can practice that range of motion. So Eden, when you go to urinate the next time,
Okay.
you sit down and you think about lowering and opening the pelvic floor.
She looks
And
like
then you urinate, and you don't push or strain, and whatever comes out. And you don't have to have every drop. Even a completely normal, non-symptomatic bladder, you're going to have 30 to 50 cc still left down in it. That's almost an ounce.
so that's
to
for the
2
next
ounces.
time.
Well, I think
Yes.
you're
It doesn't have to
taught
be bone dry.
that if you don't get everything out, you could get a UTI. That's what
It's a
I've
lot
always
we were
heard.
taught.
Yeah.
This is true. And
Yeah.
and that really, there's some truth to that, but that's for someone who's holding 150, 200 cc. They're really having what we call urinary retention. If you've got a few ounces in there, so think about if you emptied water even out of a Ziploc bag, it's not bone dry. There's a few little drops in it, but still emptied the water out of the bag.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. I have one last question.
Okay,
So-
that's fine. But can I just tell you something? You know that face you were making when you were concentrating? It brought me back to, you know how when you have a baby and you look at them and you know what they're doing in that diaper? Like, she's like thinking so hard right now. And it's also bringing me back to the Fried Green Tomatoes, a movie where they go and they all have to pull out a mirror and look at themselves for the first time and find each other. Did you ever see
yeah,
that?
I saw it. I forgot
And
about
it's
that.
just- It's just, it was so taboo back then, but if you think about it, here we are in this day and age having this conversation
Yes.
very openly, and you and I are sitting here doing,
And I'm
These-
focusing on
Right.
it. I
She's
feel my
like-
eyebrows
and,
moving.
and she's sweet. Anyway, please continue.
And you could use a mirror to look at these muscles, but most women over 50 are not going to have enough of a contraction that they're going to visibly be able to see
Is
it.
that right?
Yeah.
So my last question is there a time when you have to have surgical options? Is there, if none of this works, is it because something's falling and it needs to be
Or
picked back up, or
medications, yeah.
medications that you have to take for something else? And it's
Yes.
like,
So there are a myriad of options for this sort of thing. And it just depends on what route you want to take. So I call this like slow cooking, basically, versus fast food. Pelvic floor therapy is slow cooking. You're trying to address the root cause of what the issues are. We can't reverse age you. So some of this prolapse or falling down has just, we get wrinkles on our face and organs start to fall. And there's things you can do for all of that. There are different routes to take for all of it. So doing pelvic floor therapy, I tell people, it's, if you think about organ prolapse like your roof falling in on your house, you could suspend your roof from the top. That's surgery, suspension, and attaching it up to the pelvic area. Or you could support it from underneath with beams that are going to hold things up in place. So there are options. There's not much risk in pelvic floor therapy. There's risk in having surgery.
Right.
But even if you have a grade 4 organ prolapse, which is where you're having to put your finger to push things up back into your vagina, you won't die of a prolapse, but you certainly feel like your life is almost over because it's pretty upsetting.
It's a lifestyle distraction. You can't just come and
absolutely.
go
And let's be honest, it's not very sexy.
no.
So if you, even a very severe organ prolapse, you can make a huge impact with pelvic floor strengthening. Now, if you have a really strong pelvic floor and you still don't have, I haven't seen anyone with a really strong pelvic floor and a grade 4 prolapse. I'm not saying it doesn't occur, I just haven't seen it happen together. If someone's got that bad of a pelvic floor or that bad of an organ prolapse, they also have a weak pelvic floor. But even if you decided, I'm going to try pelvic floor therapy, I've got bladder issues, I've got bowel control issues, I've got constipation, organ prolapse, whatever any of the things are. If you ultimately didn't get as much improvement as you wanted, you could have surgery afterwards, and your outcomes for surgery are actually improved if you did pelvic floor therapy prior to. So those are
It makes really good sense.
So real quick, do you work on the bowel strength as well
so
at the same time?
this pelvic floor, think about it like that trampoline. It's all the same trampoline. It just has 2 holes in it.
Mm-hmm.
The vaginal area is the front half of the pelvic floor, and the rectal area is the back half of the same pelvic floor. So when you're doing the contract relax, some people are really talented and can disassociate the front from the back half.
Really?
But most people cannot. Most people cannot.
You got yesterday.
If you on America's Got
You need to
Talent,
go
that's a talent.
Exactly.
The pelvic eliminator.
Yeah.
There you go. But generally speaking, when you're doing the exercise, I want you to think about the front and back half, the vaginal and the rectal muscles. The muscles that you would try to close if you are at a big fancy fundraiser and you don't want to let gas out. That's the back half of the pelvic floor. The front half is what you would squeeze trying to have intercourse or urination.
You're welcome, everyone. You're welcome.
I'm thinking of the yoga tube.
Right.
The yoga tube. People, they relax and it's,
I don't know what that is. Oh,
people do yoga and they get all relaxed and then ultimately somebody
It
was
slips out.
but I wasn't thinking about pelvic floor as far as keeping gas in and things like
Yes.
that.
So if your pelvic floor is strong, and by the way, and this is one of the things I say to my patients, so I'm like, if you really have good connection and contraction of your pelvic floor, I'm like, you can't tell right now if I'm doing a pelvic floor contraction or not. Some people who are just learning, yeah, because I'm really
yes,
good.
you are.
I'm really good at it. I am very skilled at it. I've been doing this and teaching this for 25 years. But that's the goal. So you can sit and practice, but if your whole body's moving, you're like, okay.
Like me?
Yes.
Well, once you stop moving your shoulders, I can see your eyes
Yes.
moving around. And that's where
Sometimes you can see it on your
I feel like
face.
it's a mind-body connection.
Well, it is.
Absolutely.
Like,
is.
I'm thinking, okay, you can do this, but then you just throw in that they're from the same region, the pelvic. You know what I mean? Now I'm
Yeah,
like,
it's
okay,
not
which one am I
easy.
squeezing? But speaking of, so how often would you suggest doing this a day in the beginning when you're new at this? Is it something because I know you have to stick to it to see results.
So the first part, and that's where the rehab part comes in. So if you're like, I can't figure out where these muscles are, I'm so disconnected, that's where pelvic floor rehab or therapy comes in to help you teach it. If you do what I described earlier, try with your fingers, see if you can get connected. So the first thing is, are you actually doing the right exercise? So if you're trying to get your shoulders strong, and to do that, you're doing these delt raises, but instead you're accidentally doing wrist curls. I'm not going to have strong, pretty shoulders from doing wrist curls, no matter how many wrist curls I do. So as far as the pelvic floor goes, make sure you're actually exercising the right group of muscles. That's one of the downsides to some of the things that you buy online, is there's more than one way to make the pressure on that sensor increase. And you could be accidentally training yourself to push out, which might make your prolapse worse, rather than close and lift. Mm-hmm. So if you know you're doing the contraction right, then you can do something like that. And it's a great home program and it's a great way to stay fit. But once you're doing the contraction right, and you know that you're fully contracting, now that full range of motion can lower and open because you need both directions are super important.
Right.
Then you can do them as much as you want to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I once heard you should do it every time you hit a red light.
You can do that too. It's just
whenever you hit a red light,
yeah.
that you do a
Most
few
people are
contractions.
not good enough at this to be able to sit and do it at a red light. The other part to think about is when you're upright, you're against gravity. So my organs, if you're past 40 years old and gravity's been pulling on you for a few years and you've had a couple of babies, your organs are probably resting down on your pelvic floor. So you're not only having to lift your pelvic floor, you're having to lift the organs sitting down on top of them. So we actually have some people get horizontal and lie down.
Oh,
so you may want to start laying down.
To start with.
To start with, if you're having a hard time finding them, sometimes you could lay down. If you put the finger there, you try to shower, don't feel anything, you could get supine. You could lie down on your back. And then you may have a little bit easier time. And sometimes then you still won't. Sometimes you get your hips elevated a little bit up on a pillow and let gravity assist the contraction to let things fall in, especially if you have a prolapse. Yeah.
There's so much we could ask.
This
Yes.
is great.
Let's do this. Let's close out this episode by sharing some information with everybody as far as a podcast that you are starting, because of all of the information you've given, you could expand for hours on each particular piece of all of that. So tell everybody the name of your podcast, and of course we will put links up and share.
Yes, so it's brand new. It's called Pelvic Like It Is. And my plan is to be able to talk about all of these hard topics that people are scared to ask their provider for or about, and be able to at least get you started on a journey of taking really good care of yourself.
And where can people find you right now on social media?
So on social media, SmartBody Physical Therapy, our website has a ton of content. One of our pelvic floor therapists is a gifted writer, and she's done a lot of really great information on there. And then Pelvic Like It is just getting started. So There's not a big presence. There is an Instagram page, but there's not much on there yet.
We would be one of the first to follow.
Yeah.
We've been here Laura's support in that. And I feel certain we're going to have you back to talk even more about this in the months and years to come. So we can't wait to support you in your podcast. And for those who are listening right now, we do have a ladies only group on Facebook. It's called Uncluttered and Unfiltered Ladies Only. We also have our bonus group membership, which is on Patreon for $5 a month. And we invite you to join that. That is to support this podcast more than anything else, but it does offer you a lot of bonus video content. And it also gives you an opportunity to ask questions where nobody else can see. And right now, depending on when you're listening to this, because we realize this might be a year from now and we might not have them anymore, but we have these special cute tote bags we've been sending out. So that's a lot of fun. Thank you for suggesting this, Christine. It was so informative.
I learned so much, honestly. I really did. Thank you so much. This was so informative.
My pleasure.
And if this even helps one person, I'll help to Eden, because now the next concert we go to,
I'll be doing a contraction when the urge hits.
You can really make a significant impact in your symptoms just with the things that we talked about. If you'll do the things that we said.
Waiting a few extra minutes. Should I be lengthening the time I wait every time?
Yes. Remember what normal waiting is, every 2 to 4 hours. Unless you're like, if you're sitting and you guys are sharing a pitcher of beer or margaritas or something, you're drinking a lot more than normal, it may be a shorter time cycle. But generally speaking, it's not 20 minutes. It takes some time. Yeah.
Okay.
But I want to say one last thing, if I could, just for encouragement. So we as women in general have just usually accepted that, okay, I had a baby, so of course I pee my pants. Or I've been married for 30 years, it's fine if I have pain with intercourse. There's just a lot that we have, and I don't know that anyone's done it to us. I think we just become martyrs once we have children, or if we haven't had children, just as we age, we're like, I'm a woman, I'm over 50, this is what happens. But you can absolutely improve whatever the situation is, if it's pain with intercourse, bowel or bladder control, or any of those things. So wherever you are, do a little homework, do a little searching online, find someone near you that is able to help you with these things.
Love it.
Now, we always close our show by trying to figure out something that people hold on to, and then we say, and with this, you can let it go and do it back. So I would say with these kinds of issues that Laura just mentioned, the frequent urination, the incontinence, the pain with intercourse, you can let it go.
And don't look back.